In our studies in Revelation, we are now at the place where we are about to see the opening of seal number 7. So everyone will remember that. We remember the sequence. John is taken into heaven to see the judgment, and specifically it is the pre-Advent judgment, the judgment before Jesus comes again. It's the judgment of the kingdom. And we have seen that the record of the kingdom is represented by 7 seals. We saw that the history of the kingdom past is represented by 4 horses with 4 riders. Then when we come to the present time, it's represented by some souls under the altar crying for vengeance. And this period, I need to emphasize, this period, seal number 5, is where we are today. From the beginning of the judgment, the souls are there crying out for altar, and they are given white robes. And it goes right through until we come to the great events in the heavens. The falling of the stars, the moon turning to blood, the sun turning to darkness, the mountains and islands moved out of their places, and the great men crying out for the rocks to fall upon them, and the heavens depart as a scroll. And the statement is made, the great day of God's wrath has arrived. Who will be able to stand? So we are presently in seal number 5. Seal number 6 with these cosmic events has not happened yet. When that happens, it is the great sign that we have come to the close of probation. I want to repeat that because I know that this is not the way it is traditionally understood. So what I'm saying is that when you see the sun turn to darkness, the moon turn to blood, or has the appearance of blood, and the stars appear to fall, this is a sign that we have come to the end of grace, or what we would call the close of probation. Because what comes after that is the wrath of God, which is the 7 last plagues. So we know that today we are then under seal number 5, where you have the souls under the altar being examined, where you have the sealing of the 144,000, and within that same period you are going to have the mark of the beast, the final preaching message, you're going to have the work of the 2 witnesses. All of that is going to come under seal number 5, which is where we are today. So we looked at all of this, and the last week and the week before we were looking at the 144,000, and among the things that we saw is that, well, I don't know if everybody agrees with my conclusion, but I shared my conclusions. One of which is that the 144,000 is not a literal number. I'm saying this. I watched a number of video presentations this week, and one of them I saw was by some people in the Adventist church who were 100% defending Uriah Smith's book as something inspired and infallible. And the brother was even commenting about the 144,000 and how some people are in apostasy because they are saying the 144,000 is not a literal number. And Uriah Smith is very clear that they are a literal number. So I wanted to make that point. It doesn't matter what Uriah Smith says. It doesn't matter what the Adventist church says. It doesn't matter what anybody says. What matters is what the Bible says. And when you look at the biblical evidence, it's very clear to me, at any rate, that the 144,000 is not a literal number. It's figurative. Quite a number of reasons why we come to that conclusion. We looked at them last week. So these are the people in chapter 7, the 144,000, who are sealed and who are able to go to the great day of God's wrath. Who shall be able to stand? The answer is in Revelation 7. One group of people. It is those who are sealed. And the only ones who are sealed is the 144,000. So I hope everybody understood that what we also looked at is that the great multitude that John saw is the same 144,000. It's not two different groups in chapter 7. It's only one group. But in one case, John heard the number, and then he looked and he saw the number. Two different descriptions, the same group of people. So that's where we were. And so, one last thing before we move on. So, you know that chapter 7 belongs just before seal number 6. Chapter 7 is taking us back to seal number 5. Chapter 7 is telling us about the sealing of the 144,000, which is before seal number 6, because when seal number 6 is opened, nobody is going to be sealed. It's too late. When seal number 6 is opened, cosmic events, the heavens depart as a scroll, the great day of God's wrath has come. Everybody who is to be sealed has already been sealed. So, chapter 7 belongs back at seal number 5. And with that in mind, we are going to look now at the opening of seal number 7. That's where we are. So let me go ahead and share my screen, and we will take it from there. All right, so today we're going to look at the 7 trumpets, and the 7 trumpets is actually seal number 7. Okay, so as I said, we were looking at the 144,000. Now, Revelation 8 and verse 1 is where we go to. And maybe I should actually just bring up the Bible and we actually read it from the Bible. Let me do that. Let's go to Revelation chapter 8. All right, so we had stopped the opening of the seals. We stopped in chapter 6 where it says that the great day of his wrath has come, and who shall be able to stand? And what we see is that God took a little break and he went to chapter 7 and he showed us the sealing of the 144,000. So now that he has showed us this, these will be able to stand. Now he goes to chapter 8 and continues the sequence of opening the seals. When he had opened the 7th seal, there was silence in heaven about the space of half an hour. All right, so what do we see here? Now, sometimes in order to make the truth more clear, we have to go back and look at a faulty idea. Let me say faulty. I'm not going to say false, because faulty means that you make a mistake. False might mean that you are knowingly teaching something that is bad. When I was studying these beliefs from the perspective of Adventism, I read through Uriah Smith's book at least 3 times, maybe 4 times. And what he said, and what Adventists in general teach, is that there is silence in heaven for half an hour because there's nobody in heaven. What they say is that when Jesus opens the seventh seal, it is the coming of Jesus. It's the second coming of Jesus. And so everybody leaves heaven because everybody is coming back to earth for people. And so there's silence in heaven, and it says half an hour. You know, Adventists believe that every time period is specific and it must be interpreted according to a day for a year. So if you take a day for a year, you say, how much is half an hour? Well, 1 hour would be 1/24th of a year. 1/24th of a year, 12 months in a year. So 1/24th would be 2 weeks. So 1 hour would be 2 weeks. So they say that there's silence in heaven for half an hour because it's 1 week. That is 1 week. So why is there silence? It's because Jesus has left heaven with all the angels and he's coming back to earth to collect God's people. That's how they understand this. So I'm going to show you why, if you look at this, if you think about it, that does not make sense. When he had opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven about the space of half an hour. So, you have to consider where John is standing. This is the key to properly interpreting this. John is standing in heaven. You remember when we were looking at chapter 4, we saw that John was taken into heaven, and he's standing in heaven, and he's telling you what he's seeing. And he tells you about the 24 elders and the 7 lamps of fire and the great number of angels and the 4 living creatures. He's describing what he sees. He tells you that Jesus stands there and he's opening seal 1, seal 2, seal 3, seal 4, seal 5, seal 6. And he continues by saying, when Jesus opens the 7th seal, what happens? Well, up to this point, what he has seen is horses coming out, horses coming out. Then he saw the great cosmic signs, sun to darkness, moon to blood. And now Jesus opens seal number 7. And all that he says that happens is that there is silence for half an hour. So, if you think about it logically, because you have to use your reasoning when you are studying the Bible. You can't just be, as I said, a blind sponge. You know, you use what they call a proof text. The text says so and you apply that any way you want. No. John is in heaven. And if somebody had left heaven, that's the first thing John would have said. When he had opened the 7th seal, Jesus, the Lamb, and everybody else left heaven. Obviously. Because he has been describing step by step what has been happening. But no, nothing happens. John sees nothing happening. What he sees happening is that the 24 elders have been casting their crowns before the throne and praising God, and the angels have been praising God, and activity has been taking place. But now when seal number 7 is opened, there is dead silence. Nobody says anything, nobody moves. This is how we need to understand what John says he sees here. Nothing, nobody moves, nothing happens. And I don't know if you understand what I'm saying, but it's very obvious that it cannot be that heaven is empty. Because John is standing in heaven, and that's the first thing he would have said. So,
Brother David.
Yes, Brother Ian, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% on that. There's too many things to look at. One, as you said, John is basically saying what he saw. He didn't hear angel tell him that there's going to be space, silence in heaven for half an hour. He didn't hear. It's not a prediction. It's not an announcement. He's just observing what he has seen. Plus, he didn't even say it was exactly half an hour. He said approximately.
Right.
It was just his own opinion of what he saw.
Exactly. And when we are studying Revelation, I think, I hope that by now all of us have come to understand that this is important too. Because there are certain statements that are made. Whenever you hear a statement, that is a divine pronunciation. Like when the voice says, "Behold the Lion of the tribe of Judah." That's a divine statement. God intends you to take that exactly and break it down. Like when he says seal 144,000, the number, you're supposed to think about it. What can it mean? Because it's a divine statement. But there are places where John is telling you what he sees. And when he tells you what he sees, he's using human descriptive language. You have a little liberty there in thinking, what is he really saying? He's describing it this way. But what does it look like? For example, when he says that out of the throne there is proceeding lightning. You compare it to Daniel 7 and it says out of the throne there is proceeding a stream of fire. Now this is Daniel using his words and John using his words. And they are using different words to describe the same thing. So I am thinking about it and I'm thinking, what are they seeing? And in my mind, I'm thinking it could possibly be like electric sparks. So it seems to me that this could be like a stream of electric sparks flowing out of the throne. So that's how I look at it, because it's not a divine statement, it's a human description. So this is an important thing to consider when we are studying the book of Revelation. So yes, as you said, as you point out, Brother Ian, there are several reasons that if you just look at it even superficially, we can understand that nobody left heaven. John never mentioned that. So why is there this silence? Well, as we have seen, we are in the sequence of the seven seals. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But between seal number 6 and number 7, God did stop a little bit to show us the 144,000, right? When we came to this point, God didn't go straight. He stopped and he took us back to here, to the sealing of the 144,000. And why did he do this? It's because seal number 7 is about to open up something devastating, something terrible. And God wants us to know that when seal number 7 is opened, when this thing happens, his people are taken care of. We're not in jeopardy, as terrible as it's going to be. And that's why he stops before we get to 7, and he takes us back in time to show us that his people are going to be prepared, which is reassuring for all of us, and for all of us especially when we come to that time. So what we can understand from this then is that the 7 trumpets, we're about to see the opening of the 7 trumpet, the blowing of the 7 trumpets, and what we understand is that the 7 trumpets come out of seal number 7. 7 trumpets come out of seal number 7. Now that is important for us to remember, because, or to understand, because again, there are people who believe, as a matter of fact, most of the people, I suppose most of us understood this in the past, that by the time you come to, let me look at the Bible, and it's easier if you're looking at the Bible. All right, you come to Revelation 8, look at the Bible. When he had opened the 7th seal, there was silence in heaven about the space of half an hour. So Adventists say that at this point, Jesus has left heaven. And they draw a line there. All right? So, in their understanding, this line means that, okay, the end of the 7 seals. End of the 7 seals. And so Jesus is coming back to earth. And then they come to verse 2, and they start over brand new. They say God starts again. The history restarts at verse 2. So the 7 seals tell you the history of the Christian church from the time of the apostolic church until you come to seal number 7, and that is Jesus coming back to earth. End of 7 seals. So then, what about the 7 trumpets? They say God starts over. And these 7 trumpets take you right back to the early church. And it takes you right back to and then they begin to interpret the 7 trumpets as going back from the days of the early Christians right down to the coming of Jesus again. So they say the 7 churches in Revelation 2 and 3 takes you from the early church to the last church, Laodicea, entire Christian age. The 7 seals take you from the early Christian church to the coming of Jesus, the entire Christian age. The 7 trumpets take you from the early church to the coming of Jesus again, the entire Christian age. So it's the same history repeated 3 times. This is how they understand it. If you have ever read the book Daniel and Revelation or examined Adventist interpretation of prophecy, that is how they interpret it. So you see that what we are doing is completely different. What we are saying is that the 7 seals do not stop. The trumpets are actually seal number 7. The trumpets come out of the 7th seal. The 7th seal is not the coming of Jesus. It's the opening of the trumpets. When you look at the verse, when you look at the passage in the Bible, it's very clear. And as a matter of fact, let's read it so you can see what I'm saying. So there's silence in heaven about the space of half an hour. And John just continues straight. After the half an hour, I saw the 7 angels which stood before God, and to them were given 7 trumpets. So the scene is set. And another angel came and stood at the altar having a golden censer. And there was given unto him much incense, that he should offer it with the prayers of all saints upon the golden altar which was before God. And the smoke of the incense which came with the prayers of the saints ascended up before God out of the angel's hand. So let me try to illustrate that. So it's a sequence of events. The 7 angels are there, they are prepared to sound, and they stand before God. And another angel comes who has a censer in his hand. And this angel is offering up incense before God. Now, what does this mean? Everybody understands that incense represents the righteousness of Christ. And notice it says that the angel is offering up this incense with the prayers of all saints upon the golden altar which was before the throne. So, God's people at this time are offering up prayer, a lot of prayer. And Jesus is the righteousness of Christ, much incense. The righteousness of Christ is applied in a special way. When we say special way, what do we mean? I mean, whatever the merits of Jesus, whatever the benefits from Jesus has been doing for his people through all the ages, there's something more that is happening at this time. Because this time it says, much incense. So it's like the work of Christ is increased. And I'll tell you something. It's one of the saddest things that the majority of the Christian world do not study the book of Revelation. Because there is a lot of darkness, ignorance about Jesus and what he does because of this lack of study. And one of the things that Satan has done with this rapture teaching, the doctrine of the rapture says that Christians will be gone. The book of Revelation is for after the rapture. So because of this, these who believe in the rapture, they have no interest in studying the book of Revelation. But Revelation shows you here something strange. If you simply read it, the righteousness of Christ are the benefits of Jesus. The benefits of Jesus are applied in a special way. How does that happen? And what does that mean? I mean, the only way you can understand it is that something is to happen to God's people. Something is to happen to God's people that Jesus will do that he has not done before. Jesus will do something that he has not done before. The righteous benefits of Jesus Christ is going to accomplish a work in God's people that was not done before. And as you all know, we understand this to be the blotting out of the pollution of sin, the memories, the habit patterns. The blood of Christ that cleanses us from all sin will take away those remaining pollutions of sin. This is the last action that Jesus does in the Day of Atonement experience. Much incense is being offered up, and that is what it represents. If it doesn't represent this, can somebody explain what does it mean that you understand that incense represents Christ's righteousness? How do you have more righteousness than you had before? How do you have the application of more from Jesus than you had before? It has to mean something. And it ties in perfectly with the understanding that we at this time, we are down in the last moment of the Day of Atonement, the last feast, or the second to last feast of Israel, the Day of Atonement. So, this is what it signifies. So, it says, and the smoke of the incense which came with the prayers of the saints ascended up before God out of the angel's hand. And the angel took the censer and filled it with the fire of the altar and cast it into the earth, and there were voices and thunderings and lightnings and an earthquake. So, the angel offers up the incense before God. Then he fills the censer with fire and throws it down to the earth. When the censer is thrown down, it means that the door of mercy is closed. We have referred to this as the Day of Atonement. The door of mercy is closed. There's no more any opportunity for salvation. And you know, even though we understand, I will always have to explain this. This is not that God has turned away from humanity. This is that humanity has turned away from God. The entire world has rejected God to the place where not one more person can be saved. Everybody who can be saved will have been saved by the final preaching of the gospel, by the final work of the three angels' messages. Everybody who can be saved by the ministry of the two witnesses, everybody who can be saved will be saved. When this door of mercy is closed, it will be because people have rejected God completely. So I just want to make that clear, because there will never come a time that the grace of God will not accept sinners. Because God's grace is unconditional, but there will come a time when sinners will reject God so completely, nobody else can be saved. That's how we should understand this close of probation. So the angel offers up this much incense, and then he throws down the censer. He throws it down to the earth. So what does this signify? Well, here's what we understand. This censer is the instrument of mercy. In the sanctuary service, the whole purpose of the... You come lie. I have been invaded.
Blessings.
Sister Loy, she's here from taking us by surprise. She's living in Florida, but she came here by surprise, so we have to make her come say hi to the family.
Hello, everyone. Happy to see you all. And I'm happy to be in Jamaica. And I'm happy to see my pastor. He doesn't like the name pastor, but I'm happy to see Brother David.
Yeah, that's better. All right, blessings.
Blessings. All right.
Diane.
Sister Diane. Hi, Sister Diane.
All right, a nice surprise, a nice surprise. More of you can come and surprise me the same way. All right, yeah, so the censer is the instrument of mercy. The only, as far as I know, the only purpose of the censer in the sanctuary service was that it was an instrument of mercy. It represented God's avenue by which the grace of Christ was imparted to his people. That's what I understand the censer to be. Now, when the Bible says that the angel takes the censer, fills it with fire, and throws it down to the earth, there are two things we can see from this. First of all, it means that the work of the censer has come to an end. The work of ministry with the incense, which represents Christ's righteousness, has come to an end. That's point number one. The second point I want to make out is the fire of the censer, okay? Where does the fire come from? It comes from the altar. Now I want to make this point. I know we have looked at this point in the past, maybe a year or so ago, but I want to reinforce it because it's a very important point. The angel takes the fire from the altar. As a matter of fact, if you will remember, in the sanctuary service, whenever they were offering incense, they would always take fire from the altar of incense, and they would burn the incense. All of this was full of deep symbolism. Why fire? Because it brings a striking truth to our minds, brothers and sisters. God's avenue of purification is fire. This is a painful truth, but it is true. God's tool of purification for his people, God's tool for making us better, is fire. God himself says he will take us like gold tried in the fire. Fire, in Malachi chapter 3, it says that Jesus will sit like a refiner of silver, and he will purify the sons of Levi. Over and over in the Bible, God represents fire as an agent of purification. Jesus says, Jesus said that John the Baptist said that Jesus would baptize us with the Holy Ghost and with fire. So that's a strong theme in the work of God. So here's the thing. If you think of the symbolism, we come before God, and what does God do? From heaven itself, fire is placed on the incense. Fire burns and causes us to pray. Fire makes us pray. And when we pray, our prayers are mingled with the righteousness of Christ, and they come up before God to make our prayers acceptable to God. Fire is the tool that God uses to make us pray and to make us better people, to make us more conformed to his image. Fire is the tool. Now he represents the fire as coming from heaven, from the altar. And what it means is that God is a person who allows this fire. And in spite of what anybody might say, I believe that God sometimes even provides the fire. Sometimes God deliberately applies something painful because it will help us. And I can give you an example. God deliberately put leprosy upon Miriam. It helped her to be a better person. God has done that in the past. Even the thorn in the flesh that Paul had, although Paul says it was a messenger from Satan, but the Lord says he allowed it to happen so that Paul could become a better person. If you even think of Jacob was crippled for the rest of his life. Why? Because the angel touched him on his thigh. God crippled him. God took away his ability to walk properly. It was good for Jacob. So I'm saying that sometimes God brings fire, even personally, but a lot of the time he allows the fire. But because the fire is coming from heaven, God measures the fire and he allows it to have its effect of good in our lives. So God is the one who provides, this fire is represented as coming from the altar, and it burns so that we offer up our prayers. That's what the symbolism means. But now look, the censer is now thrown down. But what is in the censer? It's fire. And where does the fire come from? The fire comes from the altar and it is thrown down on the earth. So look at the symbolism. What happens when the fire touches planet Earth? What happens when the fire touches the earth? Normally, when God's fire touches somebody, what does it do? It purifies the person. It makes us pray, and those prayers become a means of binding us closer to God. That's what happens when God's fire is applied to a Christian. But what happens when God's fire, when God permits the same kind of fire to come upon the earth? What happens? And what we see when we look at what happens next is that it causes devastation and disaster. The fire that causes God's people to pray and makes them into better people, it will only make the godless blaspheme and harden them in their rebellion. Fire destroys trash, but it makes gold more pure. It makes silver more pure. And that is what we see from this illustration. Yes, Brother Ian, go ahead.
Yeah, I also want to note that there's a thundering. So one of the seven thunder is speaking here.
Right, and that seventh thunder means that it is the end of grace. Something of such tremendous significance. It's one of the most terrible events in the history of the universe, that a world comes to the place where God's grace cannot reach it anymore. But it's one of the markers, one of the messages that people need to understand, that people are aware of this terrible impending doom. So, the censer is cast down to the earth. The door of mercy is closed, the end of probation. And so let me go back to just look at this sequence, and this is how I don't want to keep harping on how Adventists interpret it, but most of us, this is where we are coming from. This is what we were taught and what we believed. That's why I want us to be clear. What is different with what we are saying? What is different? So the way Adventists understand it is that, okay, Jesus opens seal number 7, and heaven is empty because everybody is coming back to earth. And then John gets a glimpse and he sees the 7 angels standing before God, but it's not their time yet. So it's kind of hard to believe why they are there when heaven is empty. Anyway, that's how they interpret it. And then he tells you about the angel here who has a censer, and he throws down the censer, and they interpret that as we do, that this represents the close of probation. So this is the close of probation because this happens as Jesus is leaving to come to earth. Why the 7 angels are mentioned here, that is not explained. Because what they say now, when you come down to verse number 6, this is where the 7 angels start. And with the 7 angels, they go all the way back to the early Christian church back in the 1st century. And this really doesn't make sense because the angels are mentioned all the way up here before the censer is thrown down. The truth is, it's all part of one continuous story. There is no going back in time. There's no heaven emptied. The story continues. Like I said, 7 seals, we come to seal number 7. Something terrible is about to happen. The angel, Jesus opens the seal, the angel stands there. God shows you the last mediatorial work of Christ, the last offering up of the incense. And then the censer is thrown down. It is the end of grace. It is the end of salvation. And what happens after salvation comes to an end? Well, if you read the book of Matthew, if you read Matthew 24, you would say that after this, what happens is the coming of Jesus. But Revelation goes into more detail. And Revelation shows you that there is a period just before the coming of Jesus where something terrible happens. And it is the 7 last plagues. Now, this is brought out in many of the parables of Jesus, but in a different way. For example, in most of the parables, take for example the parable of Matthew chapter 22. Those of us who know what this is, let me look at it, right? I don't want to say it from memory. But in Matthew 22, for example, let me run quickly to Matthew 22 and look at this parable. And you know that I'm talking about the parable of the wedding garment. All right, Matthew 22. In the parable of the wedding garment, it says that it says, when the king came in to look over the dinner guests, he saw a man who was not dressed in wedding clothes. He said to him, "Friend, how did you come in here without wedding clothes?" And the man was speechless. Now, when it says that he came in to see the man, to see what kind of clothing he was wearing, this suggests that there's some kind of, there is an entrance qualification for you to be a part of the kingdom. Many people come into the kingdom without being qualified. But in all of the parables, Jesus shows you that there's a selection process. He talks about the man catching fish, and when he dragged the net to the shore, then he took out the bad and tossed away and he kept the good. And here he talks about the man who comes to the wedding without the wedding garment. And so the man realizes that he is not qualified for the wedding. It's kind of like what Jesus says to Laodicea, the shame of your nakedness will appear. So the king says to the servants, bind him hand and foot and throw him into outer darkness. This outer darkness represents the 7 last plagues. There is a period before Jesus comes and destroys the wicked. There's a period where there is weeping and gnashing of teeth. described here by Jesus. If you even go to Matthew chapter 25, the parable of the virgins, I think it says so there as well. And no, it doesn't say it in this parable. I don't have the time to look for it, but you'll find it in several of the parables where he says there a person will be thrown into outer darkness, and this is representing the 7 plagues. And I'm suggesting to you this evening that these 7 trumpets are the same 7 plagues, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. So the angel threw down the censer, and it says, and the 7 angels which had the 7 trumpets prepared themselves to sound. Seal number 7, 7 trumpets. But God reminds you that before it happens, there will be one final act, and that is God, the blood of Jesus, the life of Christ applied in a special way to his people before that door closes. So, all right. The first angel sounded. Sister Talia, go ahead.
Thank you, Brother David. I wanted to go back a few scriptures, which is Revelation 8, so I can truly understand your perspective on it. And it says, when he had opened the 7th seal, there was silence in heaven about the space of a half an hour. You just went and stated what the symbolism meant. But I'm asking, so when Christ returns, is he coming with all his angels, or is God going to still be in heaven, or how does that work? Because what I understand further chapters down, that God, when he says it is done, that's when he would be coming to earth or speaking from heaven. You understand what I'm asking? Because I want to be clear.
I think so, Sister Talia, and I think you also came a little late because we dealt with this verse, but I'm going to do it again for your benefit.
Thank you.
So, Jesus says, when the Son of Man shall come in his glory, with him will be all the angels. Jesus says this. There are many verses that talk about him coming with the angels, but there's one verse where he talks about coming with all the angels. So we believe that he will come with all the angels when he comes again. Now, what I said earlier on is that Adventists believe that when there is silence in heaven, it's because heaven is empty, because all the angels have left heaven. And I am saying this is not correct. This is not what the verse is saying. I believe Adventists are wrong in this. And I know that you came in a little late, but why do I believe Adventists are so wrong? Because, as I pointed out, at this point, John is in heaven. John was taken into heaven, and he's standing in the throne room, and he's telling you what he sees. He sees Jesus opening seals, and he tells you, when he opened the first seal, I saw a white horse. He opens the 4th seal, a pale horse. Seal number 5, souls under the altar. Seal number 6, the cosmic signs, the sun to darkness, the moon to blood. Seal number 7, what happens? He does not tell you that he sees anything. He says there is silence. If Jesus had left heaven and the angels had left heaven, John would have said it clearly, because he's just telling you what he's seeing. He would have said when he opened the 7th seal, everybody left heaven. But no, nobody leaves. He just says, he's standing there and he says, when he opened the 7th seal, everybody goes quiet. They stop praising God. They stop rejoicing. And the reason why they do this is because something terrible is about to happen. It's a silence of astonishment. So, what is about to happen? The 7 angels are about to blow the trumpet. That is what is so terrible. So that was the explanation that we gave a little before you came. All right, Sister Talia. Okay, so let me go back to my... Yeah, so it tells you what happens when... I'm not going to go in...
Brother David.
I beg your pardon?
Sister Diane.
Oh, where's Sister Di?
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt. Just quickly, if I'm in this room is not empty, right? So if they say he comes and heaven is empty, that would mean that the Father has also left. you can't say a place is empty if somebody is still there occupying it. And that would mean that Yahuwah would be also not there. So that doesn't make any sense to say the Father's still there waiting for his children to come home and the place is empty.
And before Brother Jimmy, I always say this. I have a lot of respect for Uriah Smith and those early Adventists. I have a lot of respect because you can just imagine if any of us starts from zero to write a book about Revelation without that background information. And you can imagine how confusing it would be for us, how confused we would be. So I read through the book, Daniel and the Revelation, at least 3 times, maybe 4, but I forgot. I've forgotten how many times. But the point is, my basis in prophecy I got from that book. So I'm not knocking it. Where I have a problem is because Adventists try to make out that it is infallible, that it is right in everything. And this is locking your mind into a kind of dark place where you cannot go forward. The Jews had the same kind of problem. You take the good and you recognize that nobody is infallible except God. And so where it becomes clear that a person was wrong, you take it and you go forward. And that is my position with Uriah Smith. So I'm not condemning Uriah Smith. I'm just saying, don't make the mistake of thinking that everything in that book is correct. As a matter of fact, that is the first thing. That's the first reason why my mind was open, because I thought the book was infallible. I've told the story many times. I paid $40. At that time, my salary was maybe something like $100 and something for the month back in those days. And I paid $40 to buy that book, I'll tell you. And one night I went to an evangelistic meeting, and 2 young Adventist ministers were preaching, and they preached something that was different to what is in the book. And I went up afterwards very upset, and I said, you guys are not preaching the truth. And I began to argue with them, and they were showing me from the Bible why what they were saying was true. And when I realized it, I said, but this book, I had my Daniel and Revelation, this book says so and so. And they said, do you think that everything in that book is perfect? I was a very young Christian. I was about 23 years old. I was stunned. I said, you mean I paid $40 for this book and it has error in it? My $40 and it has error. And when I said it, I was so outraged that they kind of backed off a little bit. They said, well, there's a lot of truth in it, but it wasn't infallible. And he took me and he showed me why that certain thing had to be wrong. I went home with my head spinning. But that's the first time I ever came to the understanding that I am not in a denomination where everything is perfect. That's the first time I ever realized that Adventist teachings are not infallible. And it was a blessing for me. So anyway, that's just a little...
It's true, Brother David. I wanted to say that it's true. But when you don't know anything and it's not being taught in your new Christian, that book with the history part of it, bringing the history part in, it was a very good help, you know, to get you started, because you can't just start in Revelation and just understand it, because even though it's called Revelation, you don't really get Revelation, you know, trying to read it. So what it did for me was it gave me some kind of footing, you know, because all that history, bringing it into the scriptures and stuff was amazing. But I get your point, because I do understand now better than I did. So thank you.
Absolutely, Sister Dad. Brother Jimmy, and then Sister Talia.
Good afternoon. With this half an hour of silence, according to what you just said just now, I believe is God's strange act.
Yes, Brother Jimmy.
Yeah, God's strange act.
I agree with you. God's strange acting, turning his back on a whole race. And that is a strange action. And this is why everybody is so silent, because it's such a strange thing. It's a silence of awe and maybe even shock.
Yeah, intense, like an intense moment.
Agreed. All right,
Yeah.
thank you, Brother Jimmy. Sister Talia, go ahead.
No, I kind of typed in my what my thoughts were, but I also agree with that strange act as the brother mentioned and what you stated, because something terrible must have been happening that everything was silent. But I don't quite connect, although it goes into the next um to the third verse of what that could be and on.
Okay,
So, okay, but thank you anyway.
so
I'll
I'm
go with
going
it.
to point out that the seven trumpets are the same as the seven plagues. I see the question you typed. Where did they disagree with Scripture? Adventists teach. Uriah Smith teaches that the seven trumpets are historical events that happened back in the days of Attila the Hun and Genseric the Barbarian, and it started back in the days of when the Germanic tribes were invading the Roman Empire. I absolutely believe that according to what we see in the Bible, when we understand it properly, no, the seven trumpets have to do with the future, the time of the seven last plagues. Now, I'm going to demonstrate that this evening. I'm going to show you from the Bible where it is very clear. So that is one of the things in which Uriah Smith made a good effort, but I absolutely will say that he was wrong. Sister Anita.
Brother David, when I was when I was a member of the Shepherd Rod message, the strange act of God, they limited it only to the Adventist church, where where we learned that Ezekiel chapter 9, you know,
Everybody will be killed except the Adventists, except the 144,000 shepherd rods.
yes, and then those who are left now, they'll go out to minister to the world. But in your study now, what I'm understanding that this strange act of God is not limited just to the churches, but it's for the entire world.
Absolutely. But,
Okay,
okay, sister.
thank you.
All right. All right. So I'm not going to go into these trumpets in detail because up to this point, I don't have any cohesive, intelligent interpretation for these trumpets. I'm just going to mention them quickly, but I want to show us in a block what they mean. Some of them I can give you some little clues, but I certainly don't know what they mean in detail. The first one, for example, it says that when the first angel sounded, there followed hail and fire mingled with blood. They were cast upon the earth, and a third part of trees was burnt up. All green grass was burnt up. I'll look at that a little later in more detail. But the first one, it's cast upon the earth. The second trumpet sounds, and a great mountain burning like fire is thrown into the sea, and the sea becomes like blood, and the ships and so on are damaged. The third one, a star falls from heaven, falls upon the sea and the fountains of waters, and they become bitter like wormwood. The fourth one, when the fourth trumpet blows, a third of the sun and the moon and the stars are smitten with darkness. When number 5 sounds, the bottomless pit is opened, and there comes out upon the earth locusts, strange looking locusts, who have wings and have hair like women and teeth like lions, and are wearing crowns, some very strange looking things. They come upon the earth. That's number 5. When trumpet number 6 is blown, the 4 angels that are tied up in the great river Euphrates are released. And when they are released, millions of people millions of people die. And then after that, we are going to stop at trumpet number 6 because number 7 is something else. We are going to come to that. But I want to ask a question. I want to point out, I want to show what I just mentioned to Sister Talia. I want to show that these 7 trumpets are the same as the 7 plagues. So even though we might not understand exactly what each of these things represent, we know generally that these are things that happen after the end of grace, the close of probation, and we understand in a block what they represent.
David,
So, yes, Brother Ian.
and let me write this in my hand. One of the things that that directed me away from Uriah Smith's view of the seven trumpets and the seals is the fact that the very first trumpet, when it blew, it burnt up a third of the earth and a third of the green things. And the very thing that the angel said to the four angels holding the four winds of the earth, not to blow on the earth until the servants of God, and not to hurt the earth nor any green thing. Why did the angel specifically say, don't hurt the earth or any green thing? And when the first trumpet blew, that is the exact thing that is affected. A third of the
Right.
earth was burnt and a third of all green things.
Yeah, thank you for that reminder, Brother Ian. Let's just look at that very quickly. This is what Brother Ian is talking about. It says, if you look at verse 7 in chapter 8, the first angel sounded, and there followed hail and fire mingled with blood. They were cast on the earth. And the third part of trees was burnt up. Let me highlight that. Trees and all green grass was burnt up. The second angel sounded, and the third part of the sea was disturbed. Now, if you when we go all the way back to Revelation 7, the previous chapter, let's go back to Revelation 7 in the right panel, so we don't lose our place. Revelation 7. It says, let me give you the King James Version. It says, another angel comes from the east, having the seal of the living God. And he cries to the four angels whom it was given to hurt the earth and the sea. And what does he say? He says, do not hurt the earth, nor the sea, nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our God in their forehead. So, the earth, the sea, and the trees will not be hurt until God's people are sealed. So once God's people have been sealed, we may conclude that the earth and the sea and the trees are going to be hurt. So that's why when we come over to chapter 8 on the left panel, that's the point Brother Ian is making, and it's very clear. The first angel hurts what? Hurts the earth, let me bring back this on the right panel, in the right panel, so we don't get confused. The angel, when the first angel sounds, it hurts the earth, and the angel was told, do not hurt the earth. It hurts the trees, was told, do not hurt the trees. And the second one hurts the sea, and he was told, don't hurt the sea. So, I mean, that alone suggests to us that these trumpets that are now hurting the earth and the sea and the trees, these trumpets are taking place after the sealing of God's people. These are not events that took place way back 1500, 1900 years ago, in the days of Attila the Hun and Genseric the Barbarian, and these early battles between the Muslims and Christians. That is what Uriah Smith suggests in his book. But I hope you have been able to see that this is not, just by this that Brother Ian mentioned here or highlighted, this is not true. This does not make reasonable sense, because we see that now the earth and the sea and the trees are being hurt. All right, so I'm going to, our time has pretty much away. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate clearly more reasons why the seven trumpets are the same as the seven plagues. And then after that, we are going to maybe stop for this evening and pick up next week. Let me take a quick one from Brother Jimmy. I see your hand, Brother Jimmy.
Yes, yes, Brother Keith. I know Revelation is a symbolic book, right?
Yes, yes.
And I know trees represent leaders and grass represent the common people. You think the same trees and the grass represent these things?
Brother Jimmy, like I said, I'm not going to try to interpret the details of these things because I don't have any clear idea. If we say trees represent people, grass represent, or then what do the seas represent, and what does the earth represent? If you
See,
if you interpret two things, you have to interpret everything. So
yeah, that's true.
I'm not able to do it. So you may be right. I can't say yes or no.
And because the reason why I say that the tree in Nebuchadnezzar's dream represent Nebuchadnezzar. And I think some in Isaiah said the people, the common people is like grass, something like that.
It could be, but here is something. All right, here's something. I'm going to show you something a little later on in these trumpets. Okay, I'm going to show you something in the trumpets because when we come up with interpretations, I mean we have to make an effort so that things are consistent. Can you still see my Bible?
Yeah.
All right. For some reason, okay, here it is. So when you look at
I got low my hand. I listen.
yes. So look at what it says. It was commanded, verse 4, chapter 9. It was commanded that they should not hurt the grass of the earth. Who is that? Neither any green thing. Who is that? Neither any tree, but only those men who have not the seal of God in their foreheads. So the people who do not have the seal of God, they are not the trees. They are not the earth. They are not the green thing. You see what I'm saying? If people represent earth or trees or green things, then who are these men who do not have the seal of God in their foreheads? It's speaking clearly about people who do not have the seal of God in their foreheads. So it cannot at the same time be referring to them as men, and at the same time be referring to them as trees and so on. If you see what I'm saying, I hope you understand my point.
Yeah, quite understand, Brother Clayton. I just don't really want to confuse with it. Just ask a question.
Sure, appreciate it. Sister Di, go ahead.
Yeah, I was thinking in those places, back in those passages that's referring to people as grass and trees, you can't then just pluck it out and then take it as a interpretation of Revelation, because the interpretation or the companion to Revelation has to be Daniel. And a lot of those other references are not in Daniel. They're in other places that are given symbolism at there for that point. I also wanted to ask, do you think that the plagues of Egypt were literal?
I'm pretty sure that the plagues of Egypt were literal.
Right, right. So that means all of them, the seven last plagues, there were 10, but then there were seven last plagues, which only affected the people of Egypt. All of them were literal, and even the blood. So when it says the waters turn to blood, I would think even in Revelation it would have to be literal blood, because there's rivers and things that look like blood now that people like to associate with Revelation. Rivers have turned red in lots of places over the years, and people like to refer that to Revelation, but it can't be because it's not really blood. So I was just
Sure. I, I am not qualified to say yes or no, as I say, because this is one area where I don't have too many bright ideas. But one thing I know is that some of these things, I'm sure, cannot be literal descriptions. For example, locusts, with hair like women, teeth like lions. Is that literal? You have such creatures? I mean, it would be a completely new species of creature. So that is clearly figurative and symbolic, but symbolic of what? So on this area, I am definitely.
I agree with you, Brother David, but I don't think whatever it is, John had language for what he was seeing at that time. You know, so I think it's descriptive of something that only we know now, but he had no language for. So it's obviously something's going to happen with that symbol that's going to be literal to the earth, you know, whatever it is. If it's a helicopter, if it, you know, that looks like a grasshopper, if it's whatever, it's going to be literal. If he just had no words to describe what he was seeing in this far future, you know, that's what I think.
And remember, they came out of the bottomless pit. There's a smoke that came out of the bottomless pit, and they came out of the smoke. And they have the power to hurt men for 5 months. So even when I think of helicopters, I'm thinking helicopters hurting people for 5 months. I mean, I can understand tyrannical governments oppressing people for a time, but it specifies these locusts. So anyway, but as you say, you know, it may be something that we don't yet fully recognize that will come. But at least for me, for the moment, it's one of those areas where I have to keep quiet because I don't have a sensible idea. Now let me see if I can quickly show why the 7 trumpets are the same as the 7 plagues. And here you find that what I have on the left will be the trumpet. What I have on the right will be the plague. Now we have not looked at the plagues yet. The plagues are in Revelation chapter 16. And we're actually now in Revelation chapter 8. But I want to make the comparison. Later on when we come to chapter 16, we'll do more. We'll look at the plagues in more detail. But I'm saying the trumpets and the plagues are the same. Right? So Revelation 8 and verse 7 says that hail and fire and blood were cast on the earth. That's trumpet number 1. Plague number 1 says that the first vial was poured where? Upon the earth. Same area. Trumpet number 2. A burning mountain was cast into the sea. Where does it affect? It affects the sea. Plague number 2. Oh, what's going on? The second vial was poured into the sea. Same area. I think it's going to keep on doing this because of how I set it up. But anyway. Number 3. A great star falls on the rivers and the fountains. Where does it affect? The rivers and the fountains of waters. And where does that plague affect? The third vial is poured on the rivers and the fountains. You can see what is happening here. Wherever the trumpet affects, the plague is affecting the same area. They are the same events, just that they are described in different ways. Trumpet number 4. The fourth part of the sun, the moon and the stars are smitten. What happens with plague number 4? The fourth vial is poured upon the sun, affects the same area. Look at those comparisons. Affects the earth, affects the sea, affects the rivers and fountains, affects the sun. The 4 trumpets, the first 4, are affecting the same exact place, like the 4 plagues. They are the same events. Why do we have the same thing described twice in the book of Revelation? Because in the trumpets, God is looking at it from the perspective of those who are in Christendom. Remember that Revelation chapter, remember that the 7 seals are looking at the judgment of the kingdom of Christ. So it's a story of the Christian church. The first part of Revelation, chapter 4 to chapter 11, is a story of the Christian church or the kingdom of Christ. Now, the trumpets are God's, let me say, God's judgment upon apostate Christendom. It's the way that the close of probation is affecting those who are apostates. Whereas when you come to the 7 plagues, it's the way that the judgments of God are affecting the world. So it's the same event, but it's looking at 2 different groups, the Christian apostates and the world in general. That's why you have 2 descriptions. Number 5, the trumpet blows, it says that the bottomless pit was open. What do we see for the plagues? It said that this one was poured upon the seat of the beast, and there was darkness in the kingdom of the beast. It looks a little different, but it's still similar. Number 6. When the 6th trumpet sounded, the 4 angels who were tied up in the river Euphrates were released. What do we see in plague number 6? The 6th vial was poured upon the river Euphrates, and the armies are gathered together for the battle of Armageddon. What do we see with number 7 trumpet? It says the kingdoms of this world, there were great voices saying the kingdoms of this world have become the kingdoms of our God and of his Christ. What do we see for plague number 7? There's a great voice that comes from the throne and says, it is done. So this is my reason for concluding that the trumpets are the same events as the 7 plagues. You look at all of these, you look at these comparisons, and it is striking. It's too exact for it to be mere coincidence. It's the reality of how it is. So, there are a few other points I want to make, but I think that this is where I want to stop for this evening. We've been going for an hour and 20 minutes, and I think I need to stop.
Brother David, that plague that you mentioned there, the 5th one, where you say it's a little bit different, the end result is the same.
Yes.
It starts out sounding different, but it actually, both of them cause darkness upon the earth.
Right.
One, the sun is dark, and the other one, the smoke came out of the bottomless pit, and the sun and the stars were dark. And the other one, darkness was poured upon the seat of it was poured upon the seat of the beast, and darkness came upon them. So it's the same thing.
Yes. All right. Before we close off, I'm going to play the song that is related to this study this evening. But Sister Esther, you go ahead first.
Well, I have a question that's not directly in this study that we had today, but I was just wondering, I've been puzzling about the fact that, it just seems like there's so many people that are coming out of Islam, Buddhism, all these other things, and they're embracing Christianity. And I'm just wondering if this could be the early rain. And if it is, it's like there's voices all over, but they seem to be quiet in a way. Like your voice is one, and Yohani over there in South Africa, and our brothers in Australia, and just different ones, but it seems like the work is going forward. So I'm wondering, when the loud cry comes, it's going to be, I know Ellen White made the statement that it's going to be seen that God has taken the work into his own hands. And I'm just kind of thinking that perhaps this is the way the loud cry is going to go, except, that everybody's not going to be aware of it, but it's going to be really blessed by the Spirit of God or something. I don't know. That's just a few thoughts.
Sure, Sister Esther. I'm very confident that God is doing something unusual in the world at this moment. I also agree with you that what God is doing is not very prominent. It doesn't stand out like a lot of other people. I was looking at some of these evangelicals, and if you even go on YouTube, some of them have they have 1 million followers, some of these channels. So there's no question that, things are not really shaping up exactly how we expect them to shape up. But I always remember that in the days of Noah, there was one little family. In the days of Jesus, when he was finished his work, there was 120. And I just know that I have a great expectation that there's going to be something unusual that happens to bring everything suddenly into the public. So I believe this will happen, and I know you believe this too, but we don't know how. So we just have to kind of keep on doing what we are doing and waiting, because I know that, like me, one of the things that I ask is, how can I do more to push the message? And if I get any ideas, I will try, but I don't have too many ideas. So I trust God, and I think that's just the way we have to go about it.
Thank you.
Brother David, I'm
Okay.
sorry, but I need to also ask this. This is to Talia. So how do you delineate that, and do you believe that counterfeit of the enemy of souls will be prominent to the degree where, well, even though it's working now, to the degree where even the elect, that could even include present truthers, one true God, and so on. So how do you
Um,
delineate from the counterfeit?
I'm coming, Sister Di. Um, I believe, I've come to believe that God does his work in ways that are unusual and unexpected. For example, I believe that it's possible that God will bring a heathen to Catholicism. And then later on, he will bring him to maybe Protestantism, might even carry him through Adventism, and so, and might be, the person might end up where we are. The point I'm really making is that the way God is working is not something that we humans can understand. So if we talk about the gospel going to the whole world, maybe even the Protestant churches are carrying it to some extent. Because when you see, Sister Esther talked about so many people turning to Christianity. Which Christianity? It's not our kind of Christianity. Some of them even becoming Catholics. Some are becoming Protestants. Few might becoming Adventists. I don't know how many of them ever come to the One God movement. So they are, some of them even come to Trinitarianism from Islam. So, and yet I believe God is working, because he's taking them step by step. He's taking them step by step. And ultimately, at the end, everybody is going to end up as one body, because everybody will come. But that work of bringing everything together is a supernatural work. None of us can understand how that will happen. So in the meantime, what we want to do is present the truth that we understand, the best way that we understand. And we try to help people to understand where there is harmful danger. But some people, even sincere people, might end up in those places, because ultimately the point is that we are God's property, we are God's project, and he knows how to go about doing the work. And we have to trust this, you know. So we just have to wait, Sister Talia.
Amen.
Sister Talia, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the Most High is doing a strange work now in countries where where Christianity is totally Islamic areas where there's no Christians. And how does he get a message to people when he can't get people in there to do it? These people are having dreams, you know, uh, and they're coming to Christ. They're seeing that Christ is the way and not the way that they were uh, following. And I read a Voice of the Martyrs today, and in Hindu countries, people are persecuted for being Christian. And in this one story, they were having church in, it had to have church in their house because the Hindu people wouldn't let them have the building that they wanted to worship in. So the man had to do it in his house. So they found him in his house. They don't care. And so they're beating up people and tearing up stuff. And the police comes, some of those radicals go to jail, but the guy who was hosting the meeting, he and some others who also had to go. And so while they're all there, the mob is screaming and carrying on. They want to know, why did you leave your ancestral religion for this Christianity thing? And one person in the crowd was able to say, well, and how did you even become a Christian? A question that he could not ask. But in this case, because everybody's doing it, he was able to ask it. And then the guy was able to give him the reason and how he became a Christian, and that guy accepted Christ and joined the fellowship. God used a situation, in a place where he couldn't, and what must I do to be saved? What must I do to be a Christian? How do you become a Christian? And he couldn't in good faith ask that question, but because of that situation, he was able, his heart was open and he received Christ. So I think things like, which we don't know those kinds of stories that are going on around the world, but yeah, I think that's the strange work too that God is doing.
Amen. All right, I'm going to pray to close, and then I'm going to play the song. I only have the audio. I don't have any video to go with it, but I'll play the song so that if anybody doesn't want to hear the song, you can leave. But let me pray first.